Okay, you guys remember this story about this cab that supposedly went through this house? And I lived over there. Remember, I went down there and I took some pictures. Here's the cab. Remember, I showed you the pictures, and I told you there was just no way that that could have happened. And then I drove by the next day, 15 hours later, and all of the news 2, 5, 7, and 9 were there. And I remember the one guy. He was on the other side of this truck. And I asked him, I said, what's going on? He goes, oh, a guy drove a cab into this house. And I said, yeah, that was 14 hours ago. And he goes, well, it's today's news. And I said, bullshit. Um, the guy that I talked to, I haven't told anybody about this. There's only one other person knows about it, but I'm going to explain it to you now. About a month, 2 months after that, I guess, the apartment building I was living in, they said they were going to sell it, so they had to have a city inspector come in. So the guy comes in, looks around, goes in my room, he sees my birds, and it's just normal. We were just talking, and I told him how I got them because I work in the trees and stuff, and that's all. I thought that was the end of it. So when they came back to do a reinspection 2 weeks later, the maintenance man said that guy had wrote up about my birds in his report, and he wanted to know how he was supposed to proceed because I had these birds. Well, there's nothing illegal about them, and so I took it personally. So when the guy was outside, this inspector, I asked him, I said, why are you writing about my birds in your report? He goes, oh, well, it's a police matter. And at that, I responded, I said, what do you mean a police matter? I said, well, my birds are my business. Mind your own business. Basically I told him, you're here to look at light bulbs and fucking sockets. Do that. Leave my birds alone. So that was a big red flag. So the wheels in my head were already spinning and I got to do something because something's getting ready to go down. So the next day I was out and I was on my way back because I already knew it was coming down the pipeline. And I get a phone call. The old lady's in the house. There's cops out in the parking lot. They're at the back of the apartment building and they're at the door with riot gear on. They have animal control is there. They have the Department of Wildlife and Fish and Game, and they had a truck there to take all the cages. So she's freaking out. I told her, I said, don't open the door. They don't have a warrant. Okay, and so she's freaking out. I drove by. I saw. They didn't know I wasn't inside. So what they did is they didn't call her. They called the daughter because they couldn't get a warrant to get in because for whatever reason this guy must have tried to lie and say, oh, he's got some exotic species or something, or whatever the case may be. The story gets weirder. Well, they couldn't do that, so they couldn't. Nobody could identify what kind of birds they are. They're starlings, okay? And I had made that clear to them. So the cops are banging on the door. They're around back, so nobody can escape. But I'm already not in the building. I'm outside driving by at that time that I got the call. So they hung around there for about an hour and they left. Now, when they left, they didn't leave a note on the door. They didn't leave any paperwork. Nothing. They just left. I can tell you something about the police. When the police try to make contact with you, Buster, they're going to make contact with you. They'll leave a note. They'll leave, a card, something, because they want to talk to you. If they went through the headache to go through all that big charades, they're going to talk to you, or they're going to come back at 7 in the morning, 10 o'clock at night until they get a hold of you. They never came back. Okay, well, as soon as they left, I came in. I got a pet carrier. I got Twink out of there, just like in Nazi Germany. I put her in there, and she was the first one to go. The next day, I got them all out of there. I've since then moved out of that county and into another location. The odd thing about it is that this inspection thing that led up to all of this, where they kept coming into the apartment and looking at this and looking at that. It only occurred to me the other day that the guy that I had talked to in this van that got out of this driver's side of this van was the same guy that was the inspector that was looking around in there. It was the same dude. This was 4 blocks from my house. They weren't in there to look at any electrical or whatever. They were in there checking shit out. Okay? The cops don't just go to your house and force like that and then never come back. They tried to call my wife's daughter and get her on the phone instead of calling me and asking me to open the door so they could get entrance, or calling the old lady and asking for entrance. They tried to get a hold of the daughter. The daughter said, I'm at work. I have nothing to do with this. The driver of this vehicle that got out, that told me that this was today's news, and I told him bullshit, was the same guy that was posing as a building code inspector, which there's no code about birds in that town whatsoever. It has nothing to do with anything. And they kept coming up. There was, this was like 7 times they went in there. Not the inspector guy, but just different people. And it just got out of hand. And so I'm no longer there. And I didn't say anything about it until now, because I gave it time to cool off. This is bullshit. Whatever happened here had nothing to do with the car. I've already told you guys they don't have to tell you jack shit. They can make up whatever story. You don't place major news there 14 hours after the fact. See, I was snooping around, and then they started snooping around at me. That was the same guy. All of that makes sense now to me. I'm no longer there. I'm moved. But I'm just trying to tell you that's how crazy this shit is. There's something major going on. And so they were, whoever or whatever was trying to figure out who the fuck I was or do whatever. Because they had different people come in and out of my apartment at least 6 or 7 different times. I mean, to where it got to be ludicrous. It was like every 2 days some new person was coming in that had to do something and they couldn't sell the building. It was just insane. And it was just my apartment. It wasn't the other part. It was this apartment, the one that I was staying in. So I'm telling you, this story is much bigger than what you could ever even imagine. There's some bullshit that's coming on, and big time, real big time. That news guy is the same guy that was posing, and I've got a real good memory. I think I've proven that in my videos. He was posing as an inspector to get into my house. Here, he was the guy that was on the news crew. Okay, this is some serious shit going on here. So, and please don't write and say, oh, they know who you are. Of course they knew who I am. They've known who I am for fucking a long time. Whatever's going on is global. That isn't any fucking car that came there. Somebody came up and out of there. Nothing went in and down. They're not leveling with people on what's really going on here. And so when you start snooping around, they want to know where you're getting your information. Just like when they stopped my mail. I've proven my work to you. It isn't like I'm making this stuff up. This is a serious thing that's going on. The whole of society is being built into believing one thing when something else is happening. And there's only very few of us that are out there actually digging, trying to figure out what the fuck it is. And then when you run into these assholes, and I don't believe that they're human. I think they resemble humans, but they're not. And no, it isn't fucking E.T. These fucks have been around here for a long, long time. So, I held off on that story until today. I just thought I'd share it with you. But Yeah, it's the same guy, absolutely.